The break room was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. A tray of dainty dishes trembled in Maria's hands as the shift manager leaned in close, his voice sharp and cruel. "You're useless. You'll never get anywhere in this company if you keep making mistakes like that." The words cut deep. Maria had been scolded before, but this was different. The insult wasn't about her work. It was about her as a person. In the corner of the room, a man sat quietly at the table, his baseball cap pulled low, a plain polo shirt stretched across his shoulders. To everyone else, he was just a new trainee. What they didn't know was that he was Leo, the CEO of the entire company. He had come undercover to learn how his employees really lived and worked. But what he was about to uncover would shake him to his core. The restaurant wasn't glamorous. Grease popped from the kitchen grill, filling the air with a heavy scent of burgers and fried onions. Customers tapped their feet impatiently on the sticky floor tiles as a register beeped with each order. Somewhere near the soda machine, a child cried. The atmosphere wasn't just busy. It was survival. Employees moved like gears in a machine that could never stop. To the customers, this was just another fast food chain. To Leo, this was the empire he had built from scratch 15 years earlier. He had once been the one behind the grill, the one wiping tables and hauling boxes. But now, after years in corner offices and board meetings, he realized he had grown distant. He wanted to reconnect, to see the truth with his own eyes. That's why he disguised himself in casual clothes. No tailored suit, no name badge with authority, just another worker, just Leo, the rookie trainee. "Hey, rookie!" The bark came from Dennis, the shift manager. Stocky, red-faced, and always sneering. He tossed a rag across the counter. "Wipe that table before someone complains. And hurry up, you're slower than my grandma." Leo nodded and obeyed. No one suspected anything. But it didn't take long for him to notice the cracks. Schedules swapped without warning. Breaks cut short. Workers shouted at for things they couldn't control. And then there was Maria. She moved quickly, balancing multiple orders at once, never letting her smile slip in front of customers. She reassured an elderly woman that her fries were fresh, promised to bring them right to her table. But as soon as the woman turned away, Dennis snapped, "Maria, stop kissing up to customers. You're wasting time." She didn't argue. She never argued. She just kept moving, her face set with quiet determination. Later, Leo overheard two workers whispering. She picked up another double. "Yeah, she has two. She's a single mom, 2 kids. Dennis is gonna run her into the ground." Leo's chest tightened. He remembered when he had worked doubles just to pay rent. He remembered what it felt like to go home with nothing left in the tank, except the knowledge that you had survived another day. That evening, in the back hallway, Maria stumbled as she carried 2 heavy boxes of frozen patties. "Need help?" Leo asked. She shook her head, forcing a smile. "I've carried heavier things in life." There was something in her tone, something that hinted at battles far beyond this restaurant. Later, during her short break, she sat across from him, unwrapping a sandwich she had clearly saved from her own shift. "You've got kids?" Leo asked carefully. She hesitated, then nodded. 2, 8 and 12. They're my whole world." Her eyes softened for a moment before clouding over. "Their dads? Not around. So it's just me. Rent keeps going up. Groceries keep getting more expensive. I take every shift I can. They don't know how tired I am. I don't let them see it." Leo swallowed hard. Her words carried the weight of survival, of resilience. But before he could respond, Dennis barged in. "Break's over. Maria, get back out there. What do you think this is? A picnic?" She stood silently, nodding. Leo clenched his jaw. A delivery truck arrived late, leaving stacks of supplies outside. Maria was the first to volunteer, even though she had already worked 9 hours. Dennis shouted orders but never lifted a single box himself. "Faster. We don't have all day." Leo carried boxes alongside Maria, watching her stumble under the weight. During the dinner rush, a customer spilled a soda across the counter. Maria rushed to clean it while juggling 2 orders. Dennis stormed over, yanking the rag from her hands. "You're making us look bad. Do you want me to do everything for you?" "I was just," she began. "Don't talk back." The word sliced through the air. Customers turned to stare. Maria's cheeks burned with shame. She said nothing and returned to work. Leo's stomach twisted. He had come undercover to learn. But instead, he was watching cruelty unfold in his own business. Maria arrived a few minutes late to the pre-shift meeting, clutching a folder. Her hair was damp from the rain. "Sorry," she said quietly. "The school bus broke down. I had to drop my kids off myself." Dennis folded his arms, smirking in front of the entire staff. "Always an excuse with you, Maria. No wonder your life's a mess. Probably why your husband left you." The room went dead silent. Maria froze. Her lips trembled, but she refused to let him see her cry. Leo's chest burned with anger. His disguise suddenly felt unbearable. He stood slowly, his cap shadowing his eyes. "That's enough," Leo said firmly. Dennis sneered. "Stay out of this, rookie. You don't know how things work around here." Leo's voice grew sharper. "Oh, I know exactly how things work." He pulled the cap from his head and dropped it onto the table. Gasps rippled through the room. Maria's eyes widened in shock. Dennis' smirk faltered. "Wait, what?" Leo straightened, his presence no longer meek. His voice thundered. "I'm Leo, CEO of this company, and you're finished." Dennis stammered, his face drained of color. I didn't mean." "You meant every word." Leo cut him off. "And it's over. Effective immediately, you're terminated." Dennis' bravado crumbled. He stormed out, muttering under his breath. Leo turned to Maria, his tone softening. "You should never have been treated like that. From this moment forward, things will change. Not just for you, for everyone here." He promised raises, fairer schedules, real support for single parents. But most of all, he promised respect. Maria's eyes filled with tears. For the first time in years, she felt seen. It's easy to forget the value of the people who keep businesses alive. Leaders often sit in offices, blind to the struggles happening in their own stores. But true leadership isn't about profit. It's about people. Their dignity, their resilience, their humanity. Leo knew he had work to do, but for the first time in years, he felt closer to his employees than ever. As he left that night, his phone buzzed. A text lit up the screen. "You think firing me solves everything? You don't know what's coming." Leo froze, staring out at the dark parking lot. Shadows stretched across the asphalt. This wasn't over, and what came next could destroy everything he had built. The rain tapped steadily against Leo's windshield as he sat in the empty parking lot. The message still glowed on his phone screen. "You think firing me solves everything? You don't know what's coming." It was from Dennis, the shift manager he had just fired. Leo tightened his grip on the wheel. He had expected anger, maybe some gossip. But a threat? That was something else. 4 years, he had trusted his managers to run the stores faithfully. But if Dennis was bold enough to insult employees openly, maybe this went deeper than one bad apple. Maybe rot had spread into the roots of his company. He had built this empire on sweat and sacrifice. If it was crumbling from the inside, he had to find out. The next morning, Leo returned. No disguise this time. He walked through the doors of the same restaurant, head held high. The workers froze, eyes widening. Word had spread. Maria stood at the counter, apron tied, her hands trembling as she took a customer's order. When she saw him, she blinked in disbelief. "Mr. Leo, you came back." He smiled warmly. "I'm not done here." Behind him, whispers rippled through the staff. 4 years. They had known the CEO as a name on paychecks, a face on the corporate website. Now, he was standing in their store, watching, listening, and he wasn't leaving anytime soon. The first cracks revealed themselves quickly. When Leo asked to see the schedule, Maria hesitated. "I don't know if I should show you. Dennis used to keep it locked in his office." That was odd. Scheduling was supposed to be transparent. Any worker should be able to see their shifts. When Leo got hold of the folder, his stomach sank. Names were scribbled in pencil, crossed out, moved without notice. Employees were scheduled back-to-back overnight shifts with no rest in between. And Maria's name appeared nearly every day of the month. "Maria," Leo said softly, "when's the last time you had 2 days off in a row?" She gave a humorless laugh. 2 days off? I can't even remember. The words hit like a hammer. But that wasn't the worst of it. In the back office, Leo found a drawer stuffed with unprocessed payroll slips. Dozens of them. "What is all this?" he asked another worker. The young man shifted uncomfortably. Dennis said overtime wasn't approved, so he just didn't file it. Leo flipped through the stack, his pulse pounding. Workers had been putting in extra hours, but Dennis had pocketed the budget himself, skimming money off the books. It wasn't incompetence, it was theft. And if Dennis had been bold enough to do this here, how many other managers had been running the same scheme? Meanwhile, Maria's struggles deepened. Her son's school had called. He was falling behind, distracted, exhausted. Maria confided in Leo one afternoon. "I can't be there for him," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I leave before sunrise. I get home after midnight. I thought I was doing this for them, for both of my kids, but they are growing up without me." Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away, not wanting anyone to see. Leo's chest ached. He had built this company on the promise of opportunity. But here was Maria, loyal, hard-working, being crushed beneath it. Something had to change, and it had to change now. The turning point came 3 nights later. Leo was in the office reviewing the files when the phone rang. He picked it up instinctively. "Hello." A gruff voice answered. "Tell your boss this is bigger than Dennis. He fires us. We'll make sure his precious company burns." The line went dead. Leo sat frozen, the receiver heavy in his hand. This wasn't just about one manager. This was organized, a network of corruption, and they were watching him. The next day, he called an emergency meeting, not with executives, not with lawyers, but with the workers themselves. They gathered in the break room, nervous, whispering among themselves. Leo stood at the front, his sleeves rolled up, his voice steady but heavy with conviction. "I built this company to be a place of opportunity," he said. "But I failed you. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what matters. And people like Dennis took advantage of that. They stole from you. They disrespected you. They broke the trust that should never have been broken." The room was silent, every eye on him. But that ends today. Starting now, overtime will be paid properly. Scheduling will be fair. And anyone caught exploiting or intimidating workers will be gone. A murmur of hope spread across the room. Maria clasped her hands tightly, as though afraid to believe it. But not everyone was pleased. That evening, Leo stepped out into the parking lot. A shadow moved near the edge of the lot. Then a voice, low and threatening, cut through the dark. "You don't belong here anymore, Leo. Walk away while you can." The figure melted into the night before Leo could respond. His pulse raced. This was no longer just about corporate reform. This was personal. Someone wanted him gone. Days passed, and the tension only grew. Workers began opening up about years of mistreatment, missed breaks, threats of being fired for asking questions, even cases of harassment swept under the rug. The deeper Leo dug, the clearer it became. Dennis wasn't working alone. There was an entire chain of managers abusing the system, each one protecting the other. And somewhere at the top of that rotten ladder was someone powerful enough to organize threats against the CEO himself. For Maria, the changes were immediate. She finally had 2 days off in a row. She was able to pick her kids up from school, cook them dinner, even help with homework. But with every step forward, fear lingered. "What if they come after us?" she asked Leo one evening. "People like Dennis don't go quietly." Leo placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You won't face this alone. Not anymore." The restaurant had just closed when Leo returned to his car. The windshield was cracked, a note pinned beneath the wiper. "Leave now. Or next time, it won't just be your car." Leo's jaw tightened. The battle lines were drawn. This wasn't just a fight for his company anymore. It was a fight for the people who gave it life. In the world of business, corruption doesn't just cost money. It costs dignity, hope, and trust. But when leaders open their eyes, when they are willing to fight, change becomes possible. Still, every fight has consequences. And Leo was about to learn just how high the cost could be. The night Leo found his windshield cracked, he realized something chilling. This wasn't just workplace bullying. This wasn't just managers cutting corners. This was organized corruption, and it had its eyes on him. The note had been clear. Leave now, or next time, it won't just be your car. But Leo had built this company with his bare hands. He had sacrificed his youth, his health, his peace. He wasn't about to let it fall into the hands of those who fed on the weak. So instead of stepping back, he stepped deeper into fire. The next morning, Leo arrived at headquarters. The glass building sparkled in the sun, but behind its walls, whispers moved like shadows. Executives greeted him stiffly, eyes flickering with unease. They had heard what happened at the restaurant. They had heard he was going undercover again. One board member leaned in close. "Leo, you don't want to dig too deep. You won't like what you find." Leo met his gaze firmly. "Then it's time I found it." Back at the restaurant, Maria was trying to breathe again. For the first time in years, she had been able to eat dinner with her kids. She had even taken them to the park. But she still carried fear. Every time a car slowed in front of her house, she wondered if Dennis, or whoever was behind him, was watching. And then the call came. Her phone rang late one evening. The voice on the other end was low, distorted. "You think the CEO cares about you? You think he'll protect you? People like you are replaceable. You speak again, and your kids will pay the price." Maria dropped the phone, her heart hammering in her chest. She realized something terrifying. This wasn't just Leo's fight anymore. She was in it too. Leo gathered a small circle of trusted employees. Maria, a young cook named Javier who had once been threatened for asking about missing overtime pay. And Ruth, a quiet cashier who revealed she had been harassed by a manager and told to keep silent or lose her job. They spoke in hushed tones in the back room after closing. "This is bigger than Dennis," Leo admitted. "He was just a piece on the board. Someone high is pulling the strings, and we're going to find out who." Javier clenched his fists. "We're with you, but if they find out—" Leo interrupted, his voice steady. "Then I take the fall. Not you. I built this company. The fight is mine." But he knew that wasn't entirely true. The people around him were already paying the price. The investigation began quietly. Leo pulled financial records. He compared payroll slips. Patterns emerged, identical shortages across multiple stores. Overtime hours erased. Supply invoices marked higher than actual deliveries. Millions were being skimmed off his empire. And it wasn't sloppy. It was precise, calculated. There was no way Dennis had orchestrated this alone. This was systemic. But every lead seemed to vanish just as quickly as it appeared. Emails deleted, files missing, witnesses suddenly silent. Someone inside the company was erasing the trail as he followed it. One night, Maria found him still at the office, papers spread across the desk. "You haven't gone home?" she asked gently. Leo shook his head. His eyes were bloodshot. "I can't. Not yet." She sat across from him. "You remind me of myself," she said softly. "Working yourself into the ground for the people you love. But even warriors need rest." Leo met her eyes. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself a faint smile. "Maria," he said, "you're the reason I'm doing this. People like you are the soul of this company. If I can't protect that, then everything I built means nothing." Maria looked down, her hands trembling. "Then you'd better win." The next blow came fast. One morning, when employees arrived, the restaurant doors were chained shut. A sign read, "Closed until further notice due to safety violations." Panic spread. Workers gathered in the parking lot, frightened whispers filling the air. "This is retaliation," Maria said, her voice shaking. "They're shutting us down to scare us." Leo's phone buzzed. Another message. "Walk away, Leo. I'll watch everything you built collapse, one store at a time." Leo's stomach dropped. They weren't just targeting him. They were targeting the very people he had sworn to protect. He called an emergency board meeting that afternoon. The executives sat around the long mahogany table, their expressions cold and polished. "This company is being eaten alive from the inside," Leo said, his voice echoing in the sterile room. "Stores are being skimmed, workers are being abused, and threats are being made. Someone in this very room is behind it." The room erupted in protest. Fingers pointed. Voices rose, but Leo's eyes scanned their faces carefully. One of them wasn't panicking. One of them was smiling. It was subtle, a smirk, quickly hidden. But Leo saw it. He didn't know who was pulling the strings yet, but he knew he was close, and that made him more dangerous than ever. That night, Maria found her tires slashed in the parking lot. Javier was cornered by two men in an alley, warning him to keep his mouth shut. Ruth received a letter with no words, just a single bullet taped to the page. Fear seeped through the cracks, but so did something else. Resolve. They were tired of living in fear, tired of being silenced. And under Leo's leadership, they began to fight back. They gathered evidence. They photographed documents. They recorded conversations. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. And the picture it painted was darker than Leo ever imagined. One evening, Maria slipped Leo a folder. "Look at this," she whispered. Inside were copies of invoices showing supplies charged at double their value. And the signature proving them wasn't Dennis. It belonged to someone much higher. Someone Leo trusted. His chest tightened. He recognized the name instantly. It was a senior executive, a man who had sat at his right hand for years, a man he had called his friend. In business, betrayal rarely comes from strangers. It comes from the people closest to you, the ones you trusted the most. Leo was about to uncover the mastermind behind the corruption, but the truth waiting for him would tear his company and his heart apart. The office was quiet when Leo slipped the folder shut. The signature on those invoices stared back at him like a wound he couldn't close. A name he knew, a name he had trusted for more than a decade. But Leo didn't want to believe it. Not yet. He needed proof, and proof would not come easily. The next morning, he returned to the restaurant. Workers whispered nervously. Maria greeted him at the door with tired eyes. "They are watching us," she murmured. "I can feel it. Every time we close, there's someone waiting outside. I'm afraid for my kids." Leo nodded solemnly. "We're close, Maria. Once I have the truth, this ends." But he could feel the tension tightening around him like a noose. Every step forward revealed more rut, but also drew more attention. Someone powerful wanted him gone. Over the next week, Leo dove deeper into the company's books. What he found was staggering. Supplies inflated by thousands of dollars. Payroll manipulated. Whole ghost employees on the records. Salaries being funneled to accounts that didn't exist. And every single trail, no matter which store, which region, looped back to the same approval signature. It was elegant theft, hidden in plain sight. Leo's longtime partner, his right hand, but he couldn't move yet. If he accused the wrong person without hard evidence, the board would turn against him. The workers would lose hope. The company would collapse. So he waited and hunted. Meanwhile, the retaliation grew bolder. Maria's children found a note taped to their door. "Tell your mother to keep quiet." Javier was followed home late at night by a black SUV with tinted windows. Ruth's locker at work was broken into. Inside was a single photograph of a family, ripped in half. Fear was everywhere, but so was something stronger. Defiance. The workers, once silent, began sharing everything with Leo. Conversations, receipts, copies of schedules. Each piece added to the puzzle. Each piece drew Leo closer to the truth. One night, while reviewing documents in his office, Leo's phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. "You don't know what you're playing with. Leo, step away. Sign the papers we send you. Retire quietly, or you'll lose more than your company." Leo gritted his teeth. "I built this from nothing, and I'll burn it to the ground before I hand it over to thieves." The voice chuckled coldly. "Then prepare for the fire." The line went dead. Days later, Leo called a private meeting with a forensic accountant he trusted outside the company. They combed through files until long after midnight. And then, finally, the smoking gun appeared. Bank transfers, shell companies, funds moved offshore, and every arrow pointed to the same man. Richard, his partner, his co-founder, the man who had stood beside him when they opened their very first store. The man who had once slept on the floor of the kitchen with him during overnight shifts because they couldn't afford a hotel. Richard. Leo's chest tightened. Betrayal rarely comes from strangers. It comes from the ones closest to you. He leaned back in his chair, hands trembling. He had the proof. But the question now wasn't whether Richard was guilty. It was what Richard would do when he realized Leo knew. At the restaurant, Maria noticed a shift in Leo's demeanor. "You found something, didn't you?" she asked. Leo nodded slowly. "I did, and it's worse than I imagined." "Then it's over," she asked hopefully. Leo shook his head. His eyes darkened. "Not yet. When corruption runs this deep, it doesn't go quietly. And if Richard's willing to steal millions from the company we built together, then he's willing to destroy anyone who stands in his way." Maria swallowed hard. "Even you." Leo didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was enough. The final confrontation came sooner than he expected. Richard summoned Leo to a private board meeting. The room was dark, the blinds drawn. Only a few executives sat at the table, faces Leo didn't recognize. Outsiders, investors, perhaps. Richard sat at the head, calm, collected. "Leo," he said smoothly, "we need to talk about your recent behavior. Workers whispering, stores closing, investigations into company finances. You're destabilizing everything we built." Leo's voice was low, steady. "Everything we built, Richard? Oh, everything you stole." A ripple moved through the room. Richard's eyes narrowed, but his smile never faltered. "Careful," he warned. "Accusations like that, they can ruin a man." Leo slammed the folder onto the table. Documents spilled out, bank transfers, falsified invoices, shell accounts. "Ruin a man," Leo said, his voice rising. "You ruined this company. You bled it dry while people like Maria worked themselves into the ground. You're finished, Richard." The room went silent. Richard leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. For the first time, his mask slipped, and Leo saw it, the cold, calculating face of a man who had been playing him for years. "You always were too sentimental," Richard said softly. "That's why you'll lose." The boardroom erupted. Some executives demanded answers. Others looked away nervously. The air was thick with fear, with betrayal. Richard stood, gathering his papers calmly. "You think you won, Leo? You have no idea how deep this goes. Fire me, expose me, drag my name through the mud. It won't matter. By the time the truth comes out, this company will already belong to me." He leaned close, his whisper like a blade. "And when it does, Maria and her little friends will be the first to suffer." Leo's blood ran cold. Richard wasn't bluffing. This was only the beginning. In business, betrayal doesn't end with a signature on a page. It spirals into war, one fought not only in boardrooms, but in the lives of the innocent who depend on justice. Leo had uncovered the truth. But truth without power is just another weapon for the enemy. And Richard wasn't finished yet. The storm had broken. The moment Leo laid those documents on the boardroom table, there was no turning back. Richard had been unmasked. But instead of retreating, he doubled down. The war for the company's soul had begun. It started with whispers, articles seeded in the press about mismanagement and CEO incompetence. Stock prices dipped. Investors panicked. Then came the legal barrage. Lawsuits filed overnight. Fraud, negligence, breach of duty. The kind of lawsuits designed not to win, but to bleed a man dry. And all of it carried Richard's fingerprints. Leo fought back. He rallied the loyal board members. He brought forward every piece of evidence. He called in regulators, auditors, investigators. But Richard was always one step ahead. Every time Leo presented proof, Richard spun it as fabrication. Every time Leo exposed theft, Richard blamed it on rogue managers already fired. The company became a battlefield, and the workers were the casualties. Maria's hours were cut. Javier was suddenly written up for disciplinary infractions. Ruth was reassigned to a store hours away, making it impossible for her to care for her father. It was punishment, not just for speaking up, but for standing with Leo. Leo tried to shield them. He covered Maria's rent from his own pocket. He gave Javier rides when his car was mysteriously vandalized. He begged HR to reconsider Ruth's transfer. But HR wasn't listening. Because Richard owned HR now, Weeks bled into months. The company's image in the public eye cracked. Customers complained of shortages, bad service, rising prices. Yet Richard painted it all as Leo's failure. And in the board's eyes, Leo was beginning to look like the liability. The pressure was crushing. One night, alone in his office, Leo stared at a framed photo on his desk. Him and Richard in the early days, arms slung over each other's shoulders, grinning in flour-dusted aprons. How had it come to this? Two men who once dreamed of building something good, now locked in a war that would leave nothing but ashes. The breaking point came at the shareholder meeting. Hundreds of eyes on Leo, cameras flashing, journalists whispering. Richard stood tall, his voice steady, rehearsed. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "our company has lost direction. We are bleeding money, losing customers, losing faith. The man responsible is standing right here." He gestured at Leo. "Our CEO has betrayed your trust. He has pursued personal vendettas, wasted resources, and dragged his company into chaos. For the sake of our future, we must remove him." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Leo stepped forward, his voice shaking but strong. "You all know me," he said. "I built this company with my bare hands. I sacrificed years, health, everything. And yes, I uncovered theft. I uncovered lies. But the man behind it all," he pointed at Richard, "is standing right beside me." The room erupted. Some shouted in defense. Others jeered. The board huddled in urgent whispers. And when the vote was called, the outcome was clear. Leo was out. Richard had won. The days that followed were hollow. Leo packed his office slowly, one photo at a time. Workers passed by with red eyes, unable to speak. Maria hugged him fiercely, tears streaming down her face. "You saved us," she whispered. "Even if they don't see it, we do." Leo forced a smile. But deep down, he knew the truth. He hadn't saved them. Richard still controlled everything. And the people who mattered most, the ones sweating, bleeding, sacrificing for a paycheck, were left exposed. Months later, the company collapsed under its own corruption. Scandals broke wide. Federal investigators raided offices. Richard disappeared into the shadows of offshore accounts. Stores closed. Thousands lost their jobs. Maria found work at a small cafe, scraping by to keep her children fed. Javier left the city, looking for a fresh start. Ruth's father passed away before she could make it home in time. And Leo vanished from the headlines, just another fallen CEO. But he carried the weight of every loss, because he had seen the truth. He had fought for it, and in the end, truth hadn't been enough. Not every battle ends with victory. Sometimes corruption wins. Sometimes the good fall and the guilty walk free. But even in defeat, there is meaning, because every act of courage, every voice that speaks when silence will be safer, plants a seed. And one day, seeds grow. In the end, Leo lost his company, his dream, his partnership, but he never lost his humanity. And maybe that's the truest measure of leadership, because when all is stripped away, what do we really have left? What would you choose, power or integrity?